All right, everybody. Looks like we're just about going live here with Dave Zulawski. Just give it 1 second to make sure we got everybody on. Everybody's got a chance to communicate and send us some chats. I see a few chats coming in already, which is great. Just make sure that you guys can hear and see us. See, Nick and Doug reached out, which is awesome. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. We've got quite a few people on, so I'm excited for that. I've got the Honorable Dave Zulawski sitting here with me virtually. Before we get into anything, and the most important thing, I got to know, Dave, what are you drinking over there?
Dewar's Scotch on the rest.
So I have to, before we get into all the fun nuts and bolts of the conversation, incredibly, tomorrow, May 1st, celebrates 38 years of Wicklander-Zulawski, thanks to, well, Dave Zulawski, co-founder with Doug Wicklander. So a toast to Doug. I know Doug's not on here with us right now, but he's probably watching from Florida. So here's Mr. Wicklander's favorite photo of himself. I think.
Boy, that's circa 1984, I think.
I think so. He's looking good. Did they have makeup put on Doug during this, or? I don't know. He looks good. 38 years is pretty crazy. So real quick, for those of you that don't know Dave, which I would find hard to believe, but Dave Zulawski is one of the co-founders of WZ, which was founded in 1982. Prior to WZ, Dave served in law enforcement for a number of years, special agent with the railroad, and then made the wonderful decision, thankfully for me, because now I have a job here, but the decision to start and found with his partner, Doug Wicklander, WZ in 82. Before we get into the important part of how the company got started, I got to ask you, who's a better interviewer, you or Doug?
This is probably a time I just need a moment to, we're very different in our styles. Doug is easily the stronger. If somebody says no, he would come right back. For me, in the original, when we first met, I was terrible. There's no question. He was better than me. But the style we were using then was very confrontational, and that's just not my personality. And that's kind of how we moved away from that. Was to find something that better suited somebody of my personality and style.
Yeah, that's fair. You weren't that complimentary of Doug yesterday at the office, but now that we're on video and he's watching.
Yeah, well, you got to be careful.
Cheers, Doug. I'm sure hopefully you're watching this, smoking a cigar and drinking with us down in Florida. So Dave, you just mentioned kind of the approach of non-confrontational, which now seems to be the most popular, well-received type of interview methods, but back in 82, it probably was not the primary choice and more of a cutting edge. What really drove the idea of non-confrontational methods versus different options?
Well, there's probably several things. One was there were people that would interrogate employees for 5-6 hours and just yelling and screaming. And clearly that it wasn't good for morale. It wasn't ethically sound. But the other reason that we did that was really for me, because the style of that, you did it, no, I didn't, that back and forth just didn't fit in the business sector well.
Yeah.
And, we were fortunate enough to work with a lot of retailers and other businesses in the private sector that really helped us understand not just, this is a case, we need to close it, but also kind of the HR, the business idea, planning for the future. I mean, there's a big picture that really we learned, or at least I learned very much in the early stages of the business.
Yeah, I think that's fair, how to approach people. It seems like, just so you know, we've got quite a few people that I don't know if we're assisting in their alcohol intake, if it's our fault or not. But we've got Buffalo Trace, we got Pinot Grigio going, mojitos. Seems like everybody's joining us. So I'm glad everybody's ending their day peacefully.
Well, that's why we started at 4 o'clock so we could start early.
Yeah, we figured that. I know you and I have had a lot of these conversations with Scotch involved, and we thought it was unfair to the world to not allow them into the incredible frames that happen and are exposed during these Scotch hours. So
Yeah, our whimsy.
yeah, I think so. When you talk about non-confrontational starting back then and the methods you're more comfortable with, I know this comes up a lot in our programs of people using some of this stuff outside of work, whether it's at home with family or buying a car or whatever else. Have you been in trouble yet for using this or any of your skills outside of the primary use?
I don't do that. My wife is too good of an interviewer. She's executive VP of HR, just retired, but she would not put up with that.
So if there was an HR case that the two of you, for some reason, one of the two of you had to handle, who would do the interview? Careful, she's probably watching.
No, she's not. But no, she probably would do it, but we would talk about it beforehand.
Strategy, yeah.
Through any interview, kind of, personality and background of the person, what they did, what do you need to resolve the case in terms of admissions or evidence?
Yeah.
So, very similar.
I think I know out of many things I've learned from our discussions and from you is, I think one of your strengths is the strategy and the preparation before an interview. I think often people, especially the experienced interviewer, shortcut that, and they forget about just sitting down and anticipating what's about to happen. I mean, for new interviewers out there, how much weight do you put on the importance of preparation and strategy?
I think a lot of it. And I, really experienced interviewers, I think they do a lot of that kind of naturally as part of their developing the case. When we first start looking at a case, I start developing background information about the person at the very onset, who's the target. So I'm interested in, how do they talk to other people? How do they deal with conflict? How have they handled past disciplinary issues, if there've been any? Are they, what do they like to do as a hobby? You ask somebody about their hobby, they selected that because it fits their personality. For me, I do a little bit of wood carving. And so part of that is having a plan of where you're going to go, because if you chop something off, it's tough to put it back on. So, you have to have kind of a plan. I'm patient. So a lot of the things that hobby of mine it really fits my personality, and it's the same for everybody. We select friends in certain ways. We select jobs, hobbies, and other things in certain ways. That tells you about the person.
Yeah, I think that's good. I know I've heard you speak a lot about almost trying to prove somebody innocent through that preparation and through the interview versus letting biases take over, and that strategy helps. We got sidetracked for a second. So you mentioned the woodworking. I think at the last couple weddings that you've been at, first, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you were first instructed at how long you're allowed to talk for, because you got so much knowledge to share during the speeches. But you were also a vendor.
You mean?
Right, yeah.
Well, the first one, I didn't know I was going to talk, so that was 3 minutes of my best stuff.
Yeah.
The second one, I knew I was going to talk, and apparently there was some complaints about the length of it. I mean, it was all brilliant stuff, but it was a little too long. And actually the 16th of May, my daughter was going to get married. It's been postponed now till the fall, like everybody, but she said I could talk if I was reasonable.
Reasonable allows flexibility.
Well, reasonable is not easily defined.
Right. Right, exactly. So if we go back to from 82 when you and Doug imagine the company to be. I mean, you can talk about climbing up the hill both ways on your way to work or whatever. I know there were some struggles early on to make sure we stayed afloat, but from what the industry is now, what WZ is now, any reflection back on the last 40 years of how the heck did this turn out to be this, or was this the vision that you had the whole time?
Oh, no, I was hoping we would stay in business for a year so I could get paid. When we started, Doug and I each put money in and weren't going to take a salary for 6 months. And I was down to taking money out of the kids' piggy bank, leaving a small IOU. And fortunately, after 6 months, we were able to take a paycheck. But we had a part-time bookkeeper, jack of all trades, who came in and did stuff for us initially, but there was no associates. And that was kind of the dream that someday maybe there would be. But to be where we are today, it was everybody that we hired, yourself, Shane, Wayne, all, Doug, everybody, from the very beginning, pulling in a single direction of doing the best we could. And so no, I'm unbelievably pleased as where we're at, but I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I would be here.
Yeah, well, it's pretty neat. As we're going through this, I've got some questions to go through, but for all of you that are watching, if you got a question that it's rare that I get to put Dave here in the hot seat. So if you got a question you want me to fire at him, I don't know if he's got a polygraph over there. We can hook him up to make it a little bit more entertaining, but feel free to send it in the chat and I'll pepper Dave with your questions within a reasonable degree. I'll use the same word. Back in 82, I think the other thing that's kind of neat, something we still do today, I know, is record interviews and interrogations. Really, any conversation we have, we're recording, and that's based off of the precedent that you all set, which I know, thankfully, I think now we're at 26 or 27 states that have mandates on recording, but way ahead of the curve. So what caused that in the beginning? And I know there's a lot of obstacles to recording, but what are some of the benefits you've seen with recording interviews and interrogations?
Well, initially, when we were going to, do a seminar on interviewing and interrogation, and engaging people visually is, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to see it in essentially real time where the interviewer is making decisions. So we decided that we would, go ahead and film and then use those as examples to illustrate the points in the class. From the standpoint of benefits, first from monitoring and measuring an interviewer. So if you've got somebody on staff and you can hear them talk and you can see them talk, and you're not just reading a piece of paper of, okay, I got this admission and this was the confession I got as a result of this. If that's all you're looking at, you really can't compare interviewers, and you can't supply them with reasonable and meaningful feedback to it. And so from just the standpoint of training, I think it's incredibly useful, because, somebody said, well, I didn't say that. Well, there you are. And listen to your voice, or listening to the pacing of this, or what kind of story is that when you knew this guy's background? So, there's some real positives. And, when you kick it up a notch into the public law enforcement, people are not free to leave. And I think, I don't disagree with the critics that we should be doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Some of them mandate just felonies or, certain classifications of crimes. But I think looking at the officers, dash cams and their body cameras makes a huge difference in how things are perceived.
Yeah, especially when it's done right. I know we had the International Association of Interviewers, IAI, did a webinar last week with Dr. Brian Cutler, and he spoke about memory. And one of the specifics was, and really of no ill intent, but how difficult it is for an interviewer to remember what they just said or what they asked during an interview just by looking at their notes. So I think it's a good point. We've had a few people with some questions and some familiar names. So we got Rob Holm. So hey Rob, our neighbor. We hope you're doing well, and Doug and Mark. But really, kind of all in a similar fashion, talking about in our current state of affairs with social distancing and people not being able to sit in the same room, maybe to conduct an interview, and leveraging technology and using video or whatever else. First of all, how important is it to be wearing pants during a video interview? I don't know who asked that question, but I saw that.
I think based on the reporter's faux pas, it's incredibly important. Even if you got blue jeans on.
Yeah. So the second question is, what do you see, what do you feel like about the move to more remote interviews? And I think would be need to hear from you, but eye-opening for a lot of people on how widely used phone interviews have been even before this. I know it's something that WZ has been training for a long time, but what success have you seen there? And do you see that as a tool that people lean on more often now?
Well, I'm kind of losing track of time, but it's got to be 10, maybe 15 years ago now that Paul Jones was with Luxottica, the sunglass hut. And he called up and said, we're getting killed in travel expenses. I'm losing productivity of my manpower for sending somebody from Florida to Alaska. I lose them for a week for one case. And can we do this by phone? And I said, sure, I think so. And that's really where it started. And to me, phone interviewing makes a ton of sense. First of all, it's, and we can talk about Zoom in a minute here, but it's kind of anonymous. It's like listening to the radio. You have a mental impression of what does this person look like? What kind of person are they? And when all of a sudden you get a picture in front of you, everything changes. Does he have a beard? Does he have a mustache? Is he clean shaven? Does she have curls in her hair? Everything's different when you have a visual. When you take that piece away, it just seems a little less threatening, because there's no facial context and the eye contact and expressions that go along with it. And with the telephone interviewing or remote interviewing, other benefits, there's obvious cost savings. You don't have to transport somebody there. But the other benefit that you have is you can use your best interviewer without any extra money. So if you've got a high value case or you've got a real tough one, you can select an interviewer that fits the personality and the strategy that you're going to employ. And so I think there's a huge amount, and I think what the current situation that we're going to see is there's going to be a big move to that because there's no alternative. And people are going to start to see that it can be done over the phone, even on a greater expanse than it is now.
Yeah.
I had a detective who did a lot of child sex crimes, and he told me that when he talked to the person, if he didn't get them to admit it, he would send them home, and he would call them later and just pick the phone up and kind of start over with the conversation. And he said it was amazing how those ones that were resistant at that last point of making an admission, when they went home, got a chance to take a deep breath, and he called them, he said it was like night and day. So I think there's a lot of value to that kind of approach.
Yeah, I think that's good. And they're in a better state of mind too, to make that rational decision and come forward with information.
Well, I mean, if it was that important, you'd be here.
Right. Yeah.
So just the phone call makes it less serious, I think.
We got a shout out here from, I'm sure you remember Michael Bruce was in your Target 1983 seminar. So a shout out to you and Doug. Back when this training was so difficult, you would send two people. Now, apparently it only takes one of us, but evolution.
No, it was the fact that I didn't want Doug out partying while I was working. So if we're going to go together.
Yeah. I'm going to sidetrack for a second. If you think about interviewing, we've talked a lot about what other careers or different things out there that are kind of interesting. I know we've chatted a lot about how neat it would be to sit in the room of a bunch of writers of a series and understand how the heck they come up with these ideas. But if interview and interrogation, this whole industry for some reason didn't work out for you, what would you have done instead?
I think I would have liked to have been a geologist. Actually, that's what I did got my bachelor's in, was geology. And then discovered that apparently there's limited amounts of mining and oil operations in Chicago. Couldn't find a job. And so that's how I ended up getting into police work. My dad said, I used to work for the railroad. Here's an ad from the railroad, and it was for a special agent. And they hired this kid out of college, and that's how I got started.
Yeah, I think that's a little known secret. I know I had the chance to, Dave and I and Annette got a chance to go to Portugal and go to a conference, and who knew that Dave would be pointing out different rock formations and labeling everything that we walked past as we were in Portugal. So you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, well, and it may not have been the truth.
It seemed good enough to me. So you're
metamorphic to me.
When you just mentioned hiring and kind of starting it in a job, I know we get requests all the time. People are interested in being instructors or working for WZ, and you've been a part of that process for the last 38 years. So any advice out there for, what you look for somebody to join your team or to be a trainer?
Well, I think probably each one of us looks at something a little bit different that they think is important. For me, I think one of the most important things is to have done a lot of interviewing. There's no amount of classroom or book learning that replaces sitting across from somebody and trying to develop a strategy that's going to work, realizing on the fly that it's not going to work and having to improvise. And, I guess they say you're an expert if you've done something 10,000 times. But to me, that practical experience that's hands-on is irreplaceable. And then obviously, can you write? Can you talk? Do you dribble on yourself at dinner?
Right.
Those are all things that, but those are things that are teachable.
Yeah.
Wear a bib.
Right. Right. On the other side of the spectrum, I know we had a lot of people joining us that are kind of either new to interviewing, or even in the last month and the next couple of months may not conduct an interview in a while. And so it's an anxious feeling the first time you go into an interview, whether it's the first time or the first time in a year or 2 years or whatever. I think it's neat. I've heard you share several examples, but it's okay to be nervous. About any suggestions on how to handle that when you first leave a training, whatever training it is, and you got to go out there and have this difficult conversation?
Yeah. To me, nervousness is the uncertainty. You go to a dentist, you sit down and you're thinking, hope I don't have a cavity.
Right.
and you're nervous until he says, okay, everything's fine, just a cleaning today. And then it's no big deal. To me, that the unknown, when we first started, and when I had trouble, it was because, I didn't really have a plan. You just went in and said you did it. They'd say no. You'd say, au contraire. and the battle would begin. And once we developed the strategy of the introductory statement, and now we've given them a chance to talk, and now it's our turn. And so my nervousness is not, I know what's going to happen for the next 20, 25 minutes, because I don't want to say it's scripted, but it's all planned out. You know, we've gone through the interview piece. Now I'm going to tell them who I am, what I do, types of crimes, how we investigate, and go into showing understanding. And it's all in a very structured pattern. And the only unknown is when I ask the question, so let me ask you, what's the most amount of money that you took in a single day? And that's the only piece of nervousness for me, because otherwise I know probably 95% of the time what's going to actually happen. Yeah. And so to overcome nervousness, it takes a little bit of practice. You've got to be able to deliver that 20, 25-minute narrative and talk in a way that people understand. And then the only question is, does it happen?
Yeah.
Do they make an admission? And with the research, they say that there's 20% of the folks out there that plan to say, I didn't do anything, no matter what. They ever ask me, I didn't do nothing. There's about 30% that are predisposed to tell you the truth anyway. And there's about half that go, I'm going to wait and see what happens. Yeah. So that means that out of that group, we can influence 80% are going to go my way.
Yeah.
I don't make a lot of mistakes. And 20% I might lose. And that's good for the ego.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And I think it's for people to know that you've been nervous. I know I've been nervous. You start any interview and I think there's some anxiety, and it's the uncertainty. I think you hit it home. Just so you know, we have a message from the one and only Doug Wicklander. He's there. He's not there with us in person, but on Zoom having a scotch. So
I knew he would.
Cheers, Doug. I'm glad you could join us. You got a message as well from Chris McGoey. Hi, Dave. We met at the 1982 or 83 San Jose seminar. Only a couple of public seminars at that time, so that's pretty cool. A lot of people that have been long-term followers, and I think so. You just mentioned research in your last answer there, and we got a lot of people on for a long time. I know something you mentioned the introductory statement, and over the last decade or longer, we've started to introduce things like the cognitive interview, the participatory method you've been teaching for a long time. Soon to come, more trauma-informed interviewing, things like that. How important is it for interviewers, practitioners, to pay attention to what the academics are doing and research that's out there?
I think it's real important because it'll tell you several things. One, it'll tell you where you're going to be attacked. So if here's what the research says, here's what you did. How can you explain this away? So it's part of the prep that you should be doing. The second thing, though, I think is that, the idea of a guy sitting in a room talking, making stuff up for going on 40 years, some things might work, but might be a bad thing to be doing.
Right.
And so we have to be careful in looking at the research, in that it's on the one hand, most of the research done is kind of in low stakes. If you successfully lie to me, I'll give you $10, or you get an hour of credit in my class, which is really different than I'm going to jail for 10 years. I'm going to lose my job, my reputation, my family. I mean, there's a huge difference in those high stakes types of situations versus somebody who is, a classroom student trying to get an extra couple of bucks. But the lessons that we can learn, I think are things that we've already seen. And now we can say, all right, here's a story that we were told, a narrative, and out of like what we learned in when we were in Portugal,
Mhm.
the you know the person who gives you verifiable results. I saw my neighbor Joe in the park. Well, you can go and ask the neighbor, and that's verifiable, rather than somebody who says, I was in the park.
Right.
So those kinds of things are validating things we've already seen, we've heard.
Yeah, I think that's good. There's a lot we can implement, take it and take from the academic standpoint, what can actually be used in a practical setting. And then I think we've done, and you guys have done it for a long time, a good job of incorporating what makes sense into the methods, and then teach that. And that came to my mind because you got a lot of people here that have known you for quite a long time, that I'm sure would be surprised what the seminar looks like today versus what it looked like so we got Rick Fernandez was with 7-Eleven and 1983, took a class in Dallas with you, and Doug Fess with Carter Haley Hall and with Debbie Maples. And so a lot's changed since then. And a lot of people have been through the program, but I think it's important. This is an industry that's always evolving, always changing. And we got to be on top of that, just like you were in 82 with kind of introducing non-confrontational was pretty much new.
Well, it's, once you stop learning and stop trying new things, you're dead in the water. And I hope that'll never be part of who we are. And I don't think it will be. So,
nah. I'm only going to keep you for a couple more minutes. I got a couple more questions unless anybody else has anything. But I'm sure people want to, sure this is the highlight of their week, but in case they want to go back.
I'm just saying, I don't mean this to be mean, but you guys got to be incredibly bored.
Well, that's why we did this during quarantine shutdown time. We had to give them something to entertain themselves with. So I got two other questions, unless anybody else has anything to bring up. But one is just if you had the chance to sit down and interview anybody, and for I guess any reason, and it could be past or present or anything, anybody that comes to mind that you wish you had a chance to conduct that interview and learn more about what they did or why they did it.
Maybe this isn't what you meant, but if I could have a chance to sit and talk with anybody, I think it would be Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a storyteller. He's humorous. He's got the historical perspective. And I think he would be incredibly fun to sit with.
Yeah. I like that. That would be neat. Storytelling. I mean, the amount of times that I've listened to interviews, it seems like the best interviewers are great storytellers, and not for their ability to fib or to lie, but their ability to relate to anybody. I think we talked, ironically, I'm sure we were at a bar, but looking at how important rapport building is in an interview, and bartenders and hairstylists and people that interact with the public, the skills that they have that translate over to interviewing.
Yeah, no, I'm actually doing research right now on storytelling, and I mean, the premise of the column that's going in Loss Prevention magazine, who has had us on, I think this will be our 20th year now, so yeah. Crazy. But if you're able to capture the person's attention with a story, there's actually changes that occur in the chemical balance of the brain. And rather than saying you are having financial problems, you're impulsive, whatever, if we can tell a story in the third person, it does a couple things. One is it builds rapport, and the changes when somebody steps into the story and it actually engages them causes changes in the way a person thinks. And one of the changes is related to trust. So really the story that we're telling isn't just, oh, here, let me tell you this story about this person who did this. It really, if we can engage the person, it builds rapport, it builds trust, and helps us to reduce resistance.
Yeah, I think that's important. I got one last question from you, and then I'm gonna recap some of the other comments that are coming in. But I know a lot of people just are figuring out ways to relax or do something that's not work related while they're stuck at home right now. Netflix, true crime series, anything. What keeps Dave Zulawski busy? And you think you need to admit to everyone you have watched Tiger King?
Sadly, I did in part.
Yeah.
It's part of my life I don't think I'll get back.
Yeah.
Yes, I like 48 Hours. I like Cops. Unfortunately, my wife hates both of them.
Right.
So she has to be gone for me to be able to watch them. So currently, I'm not watching those.
Yeah. That's fair. People are going to ask anyway, and I know you're probably not going to give an answer because you shouldn't. People want to know if Carol Baskin killed her husband or not.
Boy, I don't know.
I think that's a good, safe,
It is a good safe answer.
expert witness answer.
I don't believe he's still alive.
Yeah. That's a reasonable answer.
Yes.
I think that's safe.
And the only reason I'm hesitating is because I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched only about 5 of the episodes.
Yeah. It's enough you could get there. It's probably because you're in the 6th or 7th episode. You didn't want to watch yourself on TV. That can be difficult. We've got a couple different comments I just want to cover from an overall WZ standpoint. A lot of people asking about what we're doing going forward, or how we're adapting, how the business is changing, what courses we're offering. And so I'll take that chance that if you haven't seen it, proud of our entire team has been able to basically flip a switch and convert most of our classes to virtual. So we've been using, platforms like this and Zoom to do everything from webinars to full classes, contract classes, soon to come, human resource classes and criminal programs, all done remotely. So to answer some of your questions about what are we doing differently and what's coming, is we still want to offer that same content. So that's still out there. We've also just tried to do as much as we can, just stay engaged with the industry. So a lot of our team.
Just for a second.
Yeah.
We didn't just start with the online stuff
Right.
a month ago. We've been doing this for 2 years now or longer.
Yeah.
And we've even tested to that to say, is a virtual score the same as it would be this? And we've found that it is the same. So, this is not new ground for us, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Dave. Yeah, we did a test and compared people from a virtual atmosphere to a regular class to see how best they retained the information. It was relatively same, if not even better, over virtual, because people had more one-on-one engagement actually. But it was pretty neat. So a lot of that kind of information is out there. It's on our website. You guys can find it. You've got a lot of our other instructors are also out there just to stay engaged with everyone. So, connect on LinkedIn. We've got every morning at 9:30 Central, we're doing a quick little coffee break of some interview tips. So, Chris Norris and Brett and Tony and Wayne and the whole team has been involved in trying to just keep people engaged. Got a couple last minute shout outs here. You got John Brokar, another good friend of WZ, a great partner, says hi. Rob Holm is asking if you can tell if I'm lying when I'm saying somebody's asking a question, but it's really mine or not. We're gonna.
Yeah, you look enough that it's probably somebody there.
I'll just bring my eyes down. Makes it feel real.
Yeah.
But thanks everybody for getting on. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you so much. I wish I could see everybody and all the old friends, and I've only gotten wonderful feelings about everybody, and you've been so kind over the years, and to spend just a few minutes with you kind of reconnecting is wonderful. So it's been 38 years, a great ride, and thank you for that. Thank you, Doug, and Shane and Wayne and Dave and the whole group at WZ. So
yeah, thanks. That was
stay healthy, wash your hands.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to check in with Dave after this, feel free to connect on LinkedIn and send him a note. Appreciate you guys. Stay healthy. We'll be here. We're here now. We'll be here later. So stay safe. Thanks for hopping on.
Okay. Bye, guys.